the scope was that I was only allowed to talk to my assigned clients. I had like, 7 or 8 of them at all times, both managing personal side and the business side of money. And I was only allowed to talk about money. So every time, I got caught talking about projects or strategy or other things, I got called into my boss's office and, he would tell me that, it's out of scope, right? Like, stay in your lane, stay in your lane, which I hated. And, like I was thinking to myself, I came here to escape from that, to be told what to do or what not to do. And here I am, I've been told it's out of scope. And at that point, I just went back to grad school, get my MBA, and I just thought that I would just go back out and do all my own thing. So I started my own consultancy after that.
Welcome back to Elevate Within. I'm your host, Sandy Davis. Elevate Within is for the high-achieving women in the messy middle, the space between who you were and who you're becoming. This is a space for honest conversations about reinvention, resilience, healing, leadership, and what it really takes to rebuild from the inside out. Each week, I'm joined by my co-host, Claudia Cuevas, licensed marriage and family therapist, as we explore the stories, lessons, and emotional realities behind transformation. Because reinvention isn't just about changing our circumstances. It's about understanding yourself. It's about healing. It's about letting go of who you thought you had to be so you can become who you were always meant to be. Whether you're navigating burnout, grief, identity shifts, career transitions, entrepreneurships, caregiving, or simply asking yourself, what's next? You are not alone. So take a breath, pull up a chair, and join us at the table. This is Elevate Within. Hello, and welcome back to Elevate Within. I'm your host, Sandy Davis. When exploring the architecture of reinvention, many of us spend years trying to understand the world around us, how people think, why they make the decisions that they do, what drives human behavior. But sometimes the most important questions are the ones we ask about ourselves. Who am I beneath the expectations? What beliefs have shaped me? And how much of my life has been influenced by stories I never stopped to question? Today's guest brings a unique perspective to that conversation. I'm honored to introduce Maiko Sakai. Maiko is a consultant, entrepreneur, and diagnostic framework designer who helps people uncover the invisible patterns shaped by their decisions, behaviors, and growth. Born and raised in Japan, before building her career in North America, Maiko brings a unique perspective to conversations about identity, achievement, cultural conditioning, and personal transformation. Today, we're talking about the stories we inherit, the beliefs we carry, and what happens when we finally question whether they're true. Maiko, welcome to Elevate Within.
Sandy, thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here to have this conversation.
Me too. So, Maiko, I'd love to start at the beginning. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood in Japan and the experience that shaped you as a young girl?
Yeah, so I definitely was a late bloomer. So I made my parents worry that maybe I wasn't really developing fast enough. And with that experience, I always felt like I was behind.
Why do you
And
say that?
it's because the society, when we had a chat a little while ago, I said it's a society of conformity.
Mm.
Everybody wants to be standardized. Nobody should stick out or be different or be weird. That's the overall expectation there, right? So me just feeling behind really triggered a lot of questions like, why can I just be so and so next door? Or why can I be so and so in my class, doing well? So I was always kind of under the pressure
Hmm.
And that was a really quiet and subconscious one, just running in the background. The people may not pick up on that when they saw me when I was little, but it was always there, just on back of my mind. Am I behind? Am I not being able to keep up with it? Whatever it was. So, yeah.
And what would be like your definition of behind? Is there more strict guidelines in Japan?
Not like that, like regular things like, am I being able to tie my shoes, right? Am I, back then, yes, we did have a pencil sharpener, but we sharpen our pencil with a knife and stuff. And are you able to do it? Or can you spell certain words? And, all of those, like even basic stuff.
Really? So, when did you realize that some of the beliefs you carried about yourself might not actually be true?
So it took me a while, but after I was almost done with my elementary school education, the sixth grade, that finally I felt like I was catching up. Then I started to question whether or not it really did some kind of a damage on my development, early growth development intellectually and physically and all of that. I ended up really catching up fast when I was, anywhere from 10 to 12 or so, start gaining more confidence about how I move, what I say, all of those things. It just took me a while, but around that time was exactly the time that I felt like I actually wanted to go abroad when I get a little bit more older. And that will lead me to the fact that I came here in the States when I was 17. Even throughout, you know, um, I was questioning whether or not that place was for me. Japan, that is. I wanted to be creative, I wanted to be different, but those things weren't quite appreciated in
Mm.
a way. Unless you become this huge artist, let's just use that as an example, like a fine art artist or something out of nowhere. Maybe he studied abroad and came back to Japan and with a huge exhibition or something. He is totally okay to be that different.
Hmm.
But if you're just another person living in that society, they would not like you to be all that different because it would inconvenience the rest of them in the room or in the office or in the school, all of those things. And it's just that it's an undertone of it. And unless you were born there and grew up there as a Japanese, you may not even notice that.
Is there a difference in Japan between how women are supposed to be and how men are supposed to be?
Oh, there are a lot of rules back then. Full disclaimer, I've been away. If I've lived my most of my adult life in New York, and although I did go back, several times there to see my parents and all of those things, I never worked in Japan. So that's the disclaimer. I felt like there are a lot of different expectations for men and women. And I was speaking to somebody who had to go back to Japan and live there and work for various different reasons. She was telling me that nothing had really changed that much. So say, you might be a manager at a corporation. You may still have to serve tea for meetings every week.
Even if you were like in a high position or management?
It may have been like it was something to be expected. I think that was the story that I heard. Of course,
Hmm.
again, the disclaimer is that I wasn't there to witness it.
Right, right.
But in general, I've been told that nothing really had changed all that much the past 30 years or so.
Yeah. And then how did you start your career?
So I realized after that program, I was going to come back. That program ended in a year, so I couldn't really stay longer. I was forced to go back, but then I realized, you know what, I'm going to come back for college and I would have probably stayed. So, but then, what I realized that the biggest takeaway that I had from my exchange student year was that I was kind of like a know-it-all teenager at that point. So I was a late bloomer, all insecure for the first 10 years of my life. Then I got too confident afterwards. So in a way, it was a great experience um, for me to get my butt kicked. I think about that sometimes, like, what if I kept going? I don't know. I don't think I made such a bad decision. But anyway, so, I made sure that I majored something that I wanted to do after college so that I don't have to struggle with getting that working visa,
Mm-hmm.
H-1B visa. My major and what I would be doing had to match. So it was strategic. So, when I was still in college, I did a couple of internship, and that was a requirement anyway. And it was also great, just so that I get to have that track record of it. See, that I'm trying to stay within my major for my career, and that was exciting. And after that, one of the internship worked out really well, so I got hired. It really wasn't that difficult back
Mm-hmm.
then. But then in the beginning, still, I'm semi insecure about answering the phone, something really basic because look, I can't do it in Japanese, right? I had to
Mm-hmm.
speak in English. So my coworkers used to play a joke on me that they all knew that I had to answer the phone. That's how I started my career.
Right.
So they would pretend that, there were callers from outside and really like pretend to be very difficult
Mm-hmm.
over the phone and see how I would act. And soon enough, I realized because I hear chuckles in the background, whatnot. I realized that they're just playing jokes on me. But at that time, like, I was determined to just keep going. So I was looking for roles that people didn't want to do, like finance side of things or licensing side of things. And then I was just taking it on like actively just to make sure that I had a place there so that my visa wouldn't expire or that I don't lose my supporter for my visa and eventually green card and all of that. But again, that was just a set of concerns that run in my background. If I screw up, I may have to, I may be forced to go back to Japan, so
Mm-hmm.
I need to maximize my H-1B. I had to play the game, right? And that was something that was available. I take pride in that. I push myself to place myself somewhere else completely random. I don't have any family here. Now I do, but I didn't before. Um, Everything was worth it just because my life was too comfortable. And that was also another fear. So there's a lot of thoughts going on, when I was growing up in teenage years, early 20s, late 20s, I could have always chosen an easier route.
Right. But you wanted to persevere and take that harder road. And
Right,
could it be because of the childhood? You felt like you were a slow start, and it was like, hey,
right.
I had to push myself and I'm gonna overachieve in a way.
Definitely, definitely there, definitely there. Um, now looking back and assessing all of it, I can see that clearly when I was in the middle of that. No, like it's such a mess with all those things running that I had to worry about my status in the US while I had to worry about my career. And then I had to worry about my life, bigger
Mm.
purpose and all of those things. I didn't even give myself any time to reflect on what's driving me. I just had to keep going.
What made you get into the profession that you're in now?
So out of necessity, I always wanted to run my own business anyway. So when I was even at a corporate, I was trying to take on projects rather than trying to get promoted so that I get to sort of pretend like I'm owning something to learn something from it. So I was mentally prepped for that just to start my own business. But my first iteration was the extension of what I was doing because it was out of necessity. I didn't
Hmm.
wake up one day and said, "Oh, I have an idea." Like that didn't happen. It just unfortunately, I wish that
This was
were the
almost
case.
like survival.
Right, exactly. So I was offering music licensing work to independent labels, smaller labels, because I used to work for, much bigger labels, and I knew that one day I was going to get pushed out, and I saw the need within that, like smaller labels, the need in that work, and then they couldn't afford to hire a full-time body for that. That was going really, really well for a few years, but then again, that part fizzled out because people weren't buying CDs anymore. There were no compilation CDs. I don't know if you remember, like for Jazzercise or
Yeah.
um, even like, Ibiza 2004, or something like people used to buy those CDs, but those are going away. So that means that the licensing, started to change its landscape too. So I went back to work for a business management agency that catered to high net worth entertainment clients to manage their money, both sides, personal and a business. So I went in there, um, and I handled it because I had a background, just doing finance when I was still at a label and stuff like that. But then I hated it. I
Why?
hated it so, so, so much. Only because the scope was that I was only allowed to talk to my assigned clients. I had like, 7 or 8 of them at all times, both managing personal side and the business side of money, and I was only allowed to talk about money. So every time, I got caught talking about projects or strategy or other things, I got called into my boss's office, and he would tell me that it's out of scope, right? Like stay in your lane, stay in your lane, which I hated. And like I was thinking to myself, I came here to escape from that, to be told what to do or what not to do. And here I am, I've been told it's out of scope. And at that point, I just went back to grad school, get my MBA, and I just thought that I would just go back out and do all my own thing. So I started my own consultancy after that.
Wow, congratulations. And I'm so glad that you pointed that out. It's like, hey, you left Japan because you didn't want to be confined
Right.
and have a certain role, only to come to the US
To be
to
told the same
work,
thing.
to be told the same thing. That's crazy.
Yeah.
How did cultural expectations influence the way you saw yourself and success?
Yeah, that's a big question, isn't it? It morphed over time because I was able to sort of develop more confidence and, and having like being sort of a force to run my own business. I knew that I had to stand up and really take ownership of a lot of things. And to be honest, I liked it.
Walk us through your business, your practice, and how you help
Yep.
women.
Yeah. So I don't always say I help female founders. That's not part of my headliner. And I really wanted to be clear about that. But what I do over the years, it moved, right? The two pivoting that I've done were out of necessity. The third iteration finally is something that I enjoy doing. And I don't regret the first two. I probably needed those experiences for me to get here. But what happened was before pandemic, I used to host in-person business events in New York City. I had a good deal with WeWork for, as a venue
Hmm.
to do that. But then, obviously the pandemic hit and I was like, what am I going to do to build my email list? How am I going to promote my business? And I always was fascinated by personality tests like DISC or MBTI, Enneagram, Colby, or all those things. And I also heard a lot about using a quiz as a lead generation tool.
Hmm.
Whatever I aim for, somewhere in the middle where it's not as extensive as MBTI or how to fascinate, personality test, but it wouldn't be as shallow as BuzzFeed like quizzes. Nothing wrong with them; those are fun, but they're not going to
Yeah.
really help you achieve or solve any problems or achieve your goals, right? So I did that for my own business, and I started to get a lot of inquiries about how did you do it. I had a completely different experience going through your quiz. Then I realized, that's a validation, that's a sign. I
Right.
want to help other service providers who are selling intangibles to be able to get more leads. And not only that, that's not the aim. The aim is to get cold leads and turn them into decisive buyers so that you don't have to nurture them to death over the next 3 years. Some of them are ready to invest. Some of them are ready to buy.
I always love ending Elevate Within episodes with something reflective. So, for people listening, what advice would you give them today to live a more purposeful life?
You know, I actually had an honor of being a podcast guest for an 11-year-old who interviews business owners. And I think I'm going to repeat the same thing because it's not just for 11-year-olds or, us in 50s or someone in 30s. When I made a decision to come here, I had no evidence to back up. I didn't have any proof. I couldn't explain even why I wanted to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay. If you feel compelled to do something, you don't always have to justify that with good enough sounding reasons or logic if you're compelled to do something. And of course, not hurting others or doing, committing crimes and also
Right.
obviously. But if you're compelled to do something, you don't need a reason or you don't need evidence or you don't need to justify something. I had no idea why, like, well, kind of sort of vaguely, why I wanted to do it, but did I know that this was the journey that I was going to take? No, of course not, right? But don't let that hold you back. If you feel like there's a sign that, something that's keep, nagging inside of your head, if you're compelled to do something, you don't need a reason.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Tell the folks where they can find you.
Yeah, so I'm active over LinkedIn and Threads most of the time. So you can find me over there. And, my DMs are open if you have any questions. Non-business related to this, totally fine as well. So yeah, I'd love to have conversations like this one with as many, women as possible.
I love that. Maiko, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story, your wisdom, and your heart with our community.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. If you'd like to learn more about Maiko's work or connect with her directly, you'll find all of her information and links in the show notes. Until next time, keep elevating personally, professionally, and from within. And before I go, if no one told you that they loved you today, I love you. So, Maiko, I love you. And thank you. If this conversation resonated with you, you're not alone. That's exactly why this space exists. Elevate Within is for the high-achieving women in the messy middle, the space between who you were and who you're becoming. The architecture of reinvention is an invitation to pause, to reflect, to heal, and to begin the process of unbecoming everything you were told you had to be so you could become who you were always meant to be. Be sure to join us each Friday for our Architecture of Reinvention Roundtable discussions, where we continue these conversations and explore the deeper lessons, insights, tools, and reflections that emerge from each story. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube so you never miss an episode. For Apple Podcast listeners, I would be grateful if you leave a rating or review. It helps reach more women who may need this conversation right now. And if you'd like to go deeper, join us on Substack at Elevate Within. There, you'll find weekly essays and honest conversations about burnout, grief, reinvention, resilience, healing, and the messy middle. Free subscribers receive full access to all public content, while paid subscribers receive bonus essays, early access to upcoming series, behind-the-scenes recording, and opportunities to engage directly with the community. If you know of a woman who needs to hear this conversation today, please share it with her. You can find me on LinkedIn under Sandra Davis, on Substack at Elevate Within, and if you're in need of fractional COO work or would like to book a discovery call on how I can help, you can reach out to me at elevateopsadvisory.com. You'll find all those links in the show notes. Until next time, keep elevating personally, professionally, and from within.